Did Shakespeare, the master of tragedy, actually believe in the power of gratitude? Is it possible that amid the storms of betrayal, murder, and madness, he quietly smuggled in moments of thankfulness, tucked between soliloquies and sword fights? You're about to enter a world where gratitude doesn't always arrive with flowers and fanfare, but instead slinks through the shadows of human suffering. This isn't the obvious stuff, you probably won't know this, but buried deep in Shakespeare's darkest plays are strange flickers of appreciation, compassion, and even grace. Shakespeare's tragedies may be filled with heartache, but they also reveal a profound understanding of human resilience and the transformative power of gratitude. This series will show you how gratitude is woven into the fabric of his most famous plays, not as a naive feel-good sentiment, but as a complex, psychologically charged force. Prepare to see Shakespeare's work in a whole new light. We'll uncover the surprising ways he explores gratitude, peeling back layers of character and psychology that feel hauntingly modern. Picture torchlight flickering on castle walls, a queen whispering her last breath, or a jester bowing with a grin that hides centuries of wisdom. Gratitude is there, glowing in the cracks of human failure. Before you settle in, feel free to like the video if it brought you a little peace, and if you'd like to join us again, we'd love to have you back. Subscribe when you're ready. No pressure, just rest. Share something if you feel like it. Let's slowly drift into tonight's quiet moments together. You start in the shadowy corners, the overlooked spaces. Gratitude in Shakespeare rarely kicks down the door. It tiptoes in through character glances, half-spoken lines, and the breath between despair and surrender. You're probably thinking of grand gestures, someone shouting, "Thank you," across a battlefield. But Shakespeare's expressions of gratitude often slip in unnoticed. And that's exactly what makes them fascinating. Take Timon of Athens, for instance, a play almost nobody reads unless they're stuck in a very niche literature class. Here's a man who gives everything, showers his friends with gifts, hosts decadent feasts. But when fortune turns, and he asks for help in return? Silence. Timon's descent into bitter misanthropy is fueled by the void where gratitude should have been. He rants in the wilderness, curses humanity, and eventually dies alone. Tragic, yes, but also psychologically sharp. Shakespeare seems to be asking, what happens to the human psyche when gratitude is expected and not returned? Modern psychology has plenty to say about that. A 2017 study from the University of New South Wales explored the emotional damage caused by unreciprocated gratitude in close relationships. It found that unmet expectations of appreciation lead not just to disappointment, but to withdrawal, resentment, even depressive symptoms. Timon might have made a good case study in that research. You can feel the psychological weight crushing him as his generosity echoes back with nothing but emptiness. Here's something interesting. The word gratitude appears surprisingly few times in the Shakespearean canon. Yet its emotional presence is undeniable. Characters don't always say they're thankful, but they act it, feel it, or suffer its absence. It's there in the way Cordelia remains loyal to Lear, even after he disowns her. It's there in Brutus's torment after Caesar thanks him moments before betrayal. Gratitude, like love or guilt, doesn't always need a name to haunt a scene. There remains considerable disagreement about what Shakespeare meant to do with these emotional undercurrents. Some scholars argue he used gratitude cynically, as a way to highlight hypocrisy or emotional manipulation. Others see it as a redemptive force, the tiny ember of hope that keeps his characters human even in tragedy. You might find yourself caught between both readings. That's part of the fun, if you can call slowly unraveling your sanity in a haunted Scottish castle fun. And yet, these subtle flickers of gratitude might be more essential than they first appear. They are psychological anchors. Without them, Shakespeare's tragedies would be unbearable, like a scream with no pause for breath. Think of how Juliet thanks her nurse in quieter moments, or how Horatio stays loyal to Hamlet out of sheer devotion. These moments give the audience emotional footing. They whisper, yes, people are broken, but not beyond repair. Just a quirky detail, in Elizabethan England, public displays of gratitude were often seen as political performances. A well-timed thank you could mean advancement, favor, or even royal pardon. Shakespeare, ever the observer, likely saw dozens of examples at court. It's not a stretch to think he folded this social knowledge into his characters, layering personal gratitude with public consequence. When a duke bows, is he grateful, or just strategic? Let's slow things down with Measure for Measure. Not one of the top 5 hits, but still, this play quietly explores how characters struggle with moral choices, and how gratitude sometimes softens their rigidity. Isabella, faced with impossible decisions, still offers grace to those who wrong her. It's not loud, not grand. But it changes the emotional temperature of the scene. It shifts something subtle in you, too. That shift in energy leads us into something else, something darker. As you move through Shakespeare's world, you'll see that when gratitude is absent, people fracture. They lose trust, identity, even their grip on reality. But when it's present, even faintly, it becomes a thread they can follow through the chaos. So tonight, in this soft drift through language and memory, you might start to wonder, is gratitude really about others? Or is it something we cling to for ourselves, a psychological life raft in a storm of betrayal? Shakespeare never says it outright. But then again, he rarely needs to. You're standing with Lear now, bareheaded in a storm, soaked to the bone by the betrayal of his own daughters. His crown has slipped, his mind is unraveling. Lightning flashes not just above him, but inside him. You can almost feel the cold seep into your skin. And in this moment, this chaos, something unexpected flickers underneath the madness, the ache of thanklessness. King Lear's unraveling is one of Shakespeare's most vivid explorations of the emotional devastation caused by the absence of gratitude. You watch as a man who built his world on the belief in filial loyalty is shattered when that loyalty proves to be hollow. Lear doesn't ask for riches or obedience, he asks for recognition. For love. For gratitude. And when he doesn't get it, his mind breaks open. Here's the thing, gratitude isn't just a nicety, it's psychological glue. Modern studies back this up. A 2020 article from the Journal of Affective Disorders found that perceived gratitude from others increases psychological resilience, particularly in aging adults. It's not just about feeling good. It's about identity, safety, and emotional regulation. Lear, as an aging father and king, is a perfect storm of vulnerability. And when Goneril and Regan strip him of dignity without even a thank you, that storm breaks loose. Now, here's something odd but true. In the original folktale that inspired King Lear, the character of Cordelia survives, and everything ends happily. Shakespeare twisted that narrative, giving us not just tragedy, but a sharper emotional lesson. In his version, even Cordelia's quiet loyalty and eventual forgiveness aren't enough to stop the emotional bleed. She thanks Lear for allowing her honesty, and still, she dies. It's as if Shakespeare is saying, even gratitude has limits. The issue has sparked significant intellectual debate. Some literary theorists argue that Lear's fall is about power and pride, not gratitude. That he's more upset by the insult to his authority than by the emotional coldness of his daughters. But others point to how obsessed he becomes with thanklessness, even coining the phrase, sharper than a serpent's tooth it is to have a thankless child. That line isn't about power. It's about pain. You probably didn't notice, but Lear says the word, thankless, more than once. He repeats it like a curse. And as the storm rages, his language changes. He begins to identify with poor naked wretches, the people he once ruled over. Gratitude, or the lack of it, doesn't just crack his relationship with his daughters, it cracks his entire worldview. Here's something interesting, as his madness deepens, Lear shows a kind of displaced gratitude. He thanks the fool for staying by his side. He even offers care to the blind Gloucester later in the play. It's disjointed, broken, but it's there. Psychologically, this reads almost like a desperate attempt to rebuild a sense of connection, a final grasp at empathy. Lear can't make Goneril or Regan love him. But he can still express thanks to those who don't abandon him. Philosophers still argue whether Lear's descent is meant to warn against depending too heavily on others for emotional validation. Is Shakespeare hinting that internal self-worth should protect us from the pain of thanklessness? Or is he, instead, showing us the raw truth, that no matter how strong or royal you think you are, the need for love and appreciation is universal. Just a quirky detail, in some early performances of King Lear, audiences reportedly wept so loudly during Lear's death that the actors had to pause before finishing the final scene. Imagine that, a room full of people crying, not because of sword fights or royal decrees, but because of a father broken by emotional neglect. That's the psychological depth Shakespeare tapped into, something still painfully relatable today. Even Cordelia's return is steeped in this strange tension. She forgives her father. She shows compassion. And she expresses a gentle, quiet kind of gratitude, for being seen again, for being believed. But it's not enough to undo the damage. That moment lands differently now, doesn't it? You realize that sometimes, gratitude arrives too late to repair what's broken. And yet, Lear changes. His madness strips away layers of pride and illusion, leaving a man who can, finally, feel genuine gratitude, not for power, but for love. He cradles Cordelia's body at the end, whispering to the sky, trying to find some reason, some grace. That emotional shift is subtle, but it's real. The man who demanded gratitude finally learns how to feel it. And then he dies. It's a strangely hopeful tragedy, if that's even possible. Because while Lear's journey ends in loss, it's also filled with psychological truth. You see how craving gratitude too deeply can destroy you. But you also see how learning to give it, even in your darkest hour, can make you human again. That emotional pivot leads us somewhere else. Somewhere just as shadowed, but far more dangerous. In Macbeth, there is gratitude, but it's hollow, forced, poisoned by ambition. You'll see how saying, "thank you," can become a lie, a weapon, or worse, a mask that hides guilt. But more on that soon. For now, you linger in the storm. You watch Lear fade into silence. And maybe, just maybe, you feel the tiniest flutter of thanks for your own quiet life, your own gentle relationships, the people who see you, even when you forget to ask. You step into the gloom of Dunsinane Castle, where the air feels heavier than before. Shadows cling to the corners, and every candle flickers like it's nervous. Macbeth walks the halls now, not as a war hero, but as a man slowly suffocating under the weight of ambition. And this time, when someone says, "thank you," it doesn't warm the room. It chills it. In Macbeth, gratitude shows up twisted. It's less a gesture of the heart and more a calculated move. At first, you see a version of Macbeth who seems loyal, even gracious. After all, he starts out winning battles and earning royal praise. King Duncan greets him with words of deep appreciation, calling him worthy gentleman and showering him with titles. It feels sincere. But that's the thing. Gratitude here becomes a trap. Because Macbeth isn't satisfied with being thanked. He wants more. A well-known psychological phenomenon plays out here, the hedonic treadmill. Once someone experiences a reward, praise, recognition, they quickly adapt to it and want a bigger one. In Macbeth's case, being thanked isn't enough. He wants the throne. And once that seed is planted, Duncan's appreciation no longer feels like a gift. It feels like crumbs. A 2016 study in the journal Emotion highlighted this effect in workplace settings. It showed that when people receive positive feedback without a tangible reward, like a raise or promotion, their motivation can actually decrease if they feel undercompensated. Macbeth, sword in hand, might have nodded to that. He receives Duncan's gratitude but feels underpaid. So, he creates his own raise, through murder. Now here's something interesting. After Macbeth kills Duncan, he tries to act grateful. He puts on a show. He thanks others. He gives the impression of a grieving, loyal man. But you can hear it in his voice, it's hollow. Even Lady Macbeth notices. She coaches him to look like the innocent flower, but be the serpent under it. In this world, gratitude has become performance art. The issue has sparked significant intellectual debate. Some scholars argue that Macbeth never truly understood gratitude to begin with, that his moral compass was broken from the start. Others claim he was once sincere, and the witches simply corrupted what was already there. But if you watch carefully, you'll see how performative gratitude becomes his coping mechanism. The more guilty he feels, the more he masks it with polite gestures and empty words. Just a quirky detail, in early 17th century court life, exaggerated shows of gratitude were often expected after receiving titles or land from the monarchy. There were even guides on how to properly perform thankfulness in letters and speeches. Shakespeare would have been well aware of this culture. You can almost see Macbeth rehearsing his lines in the mirror, making sure that "thank you" sounds just right, even if his hands are still wet with blood. Eventually, Macbeth stops pretending altogether. As he slides deeper into tyranny, even the illusion of gratitude fades. He becomes paranoid, isolated. By the time he hears of Lady Macbeth's death, he doesn't thank the messenger. He barely reacts. "She should have died hereafter," he says, more a shrug than a eulogy. It's a moment that feels almost inhuman. But really, it's what happens when gratitude dies in someone's soul. Everything else follows. Philosophers have long debated the nature of sincerity in gratitude. Is a thank you still valid if it's said for strategic reasons? Can gratitude survive when it's being used to manipulate? Macbeth offers no clear answer, but it certainly shows us what happens when the spirit of gratitude is gutted for personal gain. The emotional vacuum that follows is cold, and it spreads like fog over the entire play. Here's something odd but revealing. Banquo, Macbeth's once close ally, is one of the few characters who seems genuinely grateful. He accepts the witch's prophecy with grace but doesn't rush to force it. When Macbeth rewards him with titles and praise, Banquo responds modestly. No scheming. No poisoned thoughts. Just a kind of groundedness. And that, ironically, gets him killed. In a world where ambition consumes everything, simple gratitude becomes dangerous. That's what starts to haunt you about this play. It's not just a story of power and guilt, it's a slow disintegration of emotional authenticity. The thank yous at the beginning feel real. By the middle, they're strategic. By the end, they're gone. Gratitude is a ghost wandering the castle halls, remembered, but no longer welcome. And yet, there's a faint echo of it in the way people remember Duncan. Characters speak of his kindness, his warmth, his generosity. You get the sense that people truly loved him, not because of his crown, but because he gave sincerely. Even Macduff, after losing everything, doesn't curse Duncan's name. His grief is pure. And maybe that's the quiet lesson hiding in the blood-stained corridors, that real gratitude outlives power. It's remembered long after thrones crumble. This distortion of gratitude leads us deeper into another shadow, one not of murder, but of silence. Of love left unsaid. In Hamlet, we'll explore how Ophelia's soft voice carries traces of gratitude even as her world disintegrates. It's not loud. It's not political. But it lingers. For now, let Macbeth fade into the mist. Let the clatter of daggers and lies fall silent. You've seen what happens when people fake gratitude, and what's left behind when even that illusion collapses. You drift now into the cold, echoing corridors of Elsinore. Not the throne room, but somewhere quieter, Ophelia's chambers. The political plots of Hamlet swirl outside these walls, but here, the air feels different. Still. Fragile. You can almost hear the soft rustle of a gown, the hush of a breath held too long. This is where gratitude doesn't shout. It murmurs. It glances sideways. And in Ophelia, it becomes something deeply human, tender, confused, and tragically restrained. Gratitude in Hamlet doesn't operate like it did in Macbeth or Lear. It's not used as a weapon or a desperate plea. It appears fleetingly, like a reflection in water. In Ophelia's case, it's entangled with obedience, affection, and emotional pressure. You see her caught between her father Polonius, her brother Laertes, and her love for Hamlet. Every word of thanks she offers feels like it's wrapped in tension, an effort to keep the peace, to keep herself afloat in a court where women's voices are often just decor. One moment that slips under most readers' radar is her gentle exchange with Laertes before he departs for France. He warns her about Hamlet's affections. She listens. She thanks him. "I shall the effect of this good lesson keep," she says, almost like a schoolgirl reciting a line for approval. But if you lean in, you can feel something deeper. Ophelia is showing gratitude not just as courtesy, but as survival. She thanks people who talk over her, who use her, because what else can she do? A 2015 study published in Psychological Review examined how gratitude can be expressed under coercion, especially among individuals in unequal power dynamics. The findings were revealing. In situations where autonomy is compromised, expressions of gratitude often mask stress responses. People thank others not because they feel grateful, but because they're trying to maintain safety. Ophelia is practically the embodiment of that theory. Her thanks are soft, but their subtext screams. Here's something interesting. In Elizabethan performance practice, women on stage were portrayed by boys, which often exaggerated femininity and emotional fragility. Audiences watching Ophelia would have seen not just her words, but her body language, her posture, slightly bowed, deferential, restrained. The gratitude she expresses would have seemed sweet on the surface, but her physical presence added layers of emotional discomfort. It was an act of thankfulness that came with a knot in the stomach. There remains considerable disagreement about Ophelia's emotional autonomy. Some scholars read her as a blank slate, an echo of others' desires. Others see her as quietly resisting, using politeness and subtle gratitude as shields. What's more compelling, perhaps, is that Shakespeare doesn't make it clear. You, the listener, are left to decide, is Ophelia's politeness sincere, or is it a psychological reflex against a world that rarely listens to her? Then there's Hamlet himself. When he turns cold, when he mocks and confuses her, Ophelia doesn't lash out. She remains gentle, though confused. There's a quiet moment, before her madness, when she hands out imaginary flowers, each one a symbolic gesture. There's rosemary, that's for remembrance. Pray you, love, remember. It's heartbreaking, and it's layered with something like gratitude, a final, flickering thanks for what she once felt with Hamlet, now drifting out of reach. Just a quirky detail, rosemary, in Shakespeare's time, was associated not just with memory but with loyalty and funerals. Brides carried it. Mourners wore it. By offering it in her madness, Ophelia may be thanking Hamlet not only for love but for breaking her heart, an oddly poetic farewell wrapped in the scent of herbs. Modern psychology circles back to this idea of ambiguous gratitude. It's not always clear-cut. Sometimes, we feel grateful for the wrong things. For attention that harms us. For relationships that validate us briefly but destroy us slowly. Ophelia's descent into madness may be interpreted as the mind trying to resolve an emotional paradox, thanking those who damage you, because you don't know how not to. Philosophers have long debated the nature of moral obligation in emotional expression. Are we ever required to feel thankful? Is it a virtue, or a social demand? Ophelia's life seems built on that very tension. She's constantly performing emotional duties expected of her, even when they crush her. She's grateful when it's not safe to be honest. And that's part of what makes her so quietly devastating. What haunts you, though, is that no one seems to thank her. Not genuinely. Not deeply. She offers so much of herself, her trust, her care, her body, her voice, and she receives orders, suspicion, and silence. Her father uses her as bait. Her brother lectures her. Hamlet turns her into a target. Even her death is a rumor, told secondhand by the queen. She drifts away, not with applause, but with a whisper. And maybe that's why her madness lingers. It's the mind's final act of rebellion, a cry beneath the politeness. Her broken thoughts, her symbolic flowers, her non-linear speech, all feel like a mind finally refusing to say thank you to a world that took and never gave back. Gratitude, when denied too long, doesn't just fade. It fractures. Here's something else. You might find yourself feeling grateful to Ophelia. Not for what she says, but for what she reveals, about emotional suppression, about performative politeness, about the weight of unspoken expectations. In her, you see echoes of anyone who ever smiled when they wanted to scream. Anyone who thanked someone they feared. And now, that energy leads us somewhere more strategic. Gratitude doesn't always come from innocence or love. In Julius Caesar, it's calculated, an exchange of power, a tool for survival. There, people say, "Thank you," with knives behind their backs. But for now, sit with Ophelia's stillness. Let her voice echo softly through your thoughts. Let her quiet, careful gratitude stir something deeper, maybe a thank you of your own, whispered into the quiet, for everyone who ever held their heart together with politeness and grace. Now you're standing in the heart of Rome. Statues loom tall, the crowd buzzes with political fervor, and betrayal is only ever one persuasive speech away. Julius Caesar isn't soft like Hamlet, it's sharp-edged, articulate, and brutally public. And here, gratitude has shape-shifted again. It no longer whispers or falters. It roars through Senate halls, dresses itself in rhetoric, and operates like a currency. In this world, people don't give thanks, they leverage it. Take Brutus. Noble Brutus, the man of principle, the philosopher-senator. He's the perfect case study in gratitude twisted into obligation. Caesar loves him, trusts him, elevates him. You could argue Caesar's entire downfall hinges on his inability to see that gratitude can't prevent betrayal. And Brutus? He justifies stabbing Caesar not in spite of Caesar's kindness, but because of it. That's a strange thought, isn't it? That a person might feel so overwhelmed by gratitude that they try to outpace it by destroying its source. A 2018 study from the Journal of Experimental Psychology explored something eerily similar: how gratitude can evoke guilt and even resentment when people feel unable to reciprocate. Participants who were thanked profusely for minor favors reported more emotional discomfort than satisfaction, especially if they felt the praise was disproportionate. That might explain Brutus's behavior better than any political motive. Caesar's endless trust and praise put Brutus in a position he can't emotionally tolerate. So he frees himself, with a knife. Here's something interesting: in Roman culture, gratitude was closely tied to public duty. To accept praise or reward without reciprocating could be seen as shameful. Shakespeare was well read in Roman history, and he uses this idea like a scalpel. The conspirators don't just kill Caesar because he's powerful. They kill him because the social ledger has grown lopsided. Caesar is thanked like a god, and no one, especially Brutus, can live with that imbalance. The issue has sparked significant intellectual debate. Some critics argue that Brutus is merely rationalizing power envy with the language of gratitude and loyalty. Others believe he's psychologically trapped, emotionally obligated, yet politically conflicted. What's clear is that Shakespeare crafts a world where gratitude is dangerous. It exposes vulnerability. It creates debts that can never be repaid cleanly. And what of Antony? His funeral oration is one of Shakespeare's most famous monologues, and it hinges entirely on gratitude's psychological pull. "Friends, Romans, countrymen," he begins, not with anger, not with an accusation, but with a kind of civic warmth. And then comes the pivot: "You all did love him once, not without cause." What cause withholds you then to mourn for him? He's not shouting yet. He's reminding them of their gratitude. Not demanding justice, just evoking memory. You might find this surprising. The speech has been studied in political psychology courses as a prime example of persuasive framing. Antony doesn't tell the crowd what to feel. He leads them to remember what they already felt, and that reawakens their loyalty. Gratitude, once dormant, flares back into life. And just like that, the mob turns. Just a quirky detail: in the original performances of Julius Caesar, actors sometimes used handkerchiefs or tokens during the funeral scene to mimic Roman funeral rites. These little gestures of remembrance weren't just props, they symbolized public gratitude, visually reinforcing Antony's appeal to memory and loyalty. Shakespeare didn't just write about gratitude, he staged it. There's a fascinating tension here: Antony manipulates gratitude, but he's not entirely insincere. That's what makes it work. His affection for Caesar is real. His rage is real. But his use of those emotions is masterful. He thanks the crowd. He thanks Caesar. But each "thank you" is a blade wrapped in velvet. You don't know whether to trust him or cheer for him, or both. Philosophers still argue whether this makes Antony a hero or a demagogue. Is sincere gratitude corrupted when it's used for strategic gain? Or is the act of awakening dormant emotion inherently noble? The truth probably lies somewhere in between, as it often does with Shakespeare. He rarely writes clean heroes. Just very articulate humans. Even Cassius, that snake in the grass, understands the emotional currency of thanks. He flatters Brutus, praises him, builds him up with the language of gratitude, until Brutus believes himself morally destined to act. Cassius doesn't manipulate with threats. He manipulates with admiration. I have not from your eyes that gentleness, he says, softly seeding doubt. Gratitude here becomes a form of control. Here's something odd but telling. Throughout the play, characters rarely express gratitude directly to Caesar. There are praises, titles, honors, but few moments of emotional appreciation. It's as if his godlike stature makes real gratitude impossible. How do you thank a man who thinks himself divine? You either worship him, or bring him down. And after the murder? The emotional reckoning doesn't happen in speeches. It happens in dreams, in guilt, in suicides. Brutus sees Caesar's ghost and begins to unravel. He tries to hold on to honor, but something in him knows that what he did broke an emotional law. He betrayed someone who believed in him. That's a different kind of guilt, a grief over gratitude betrayed. So when Brutus takes his life, he says, "Caesar, now be still." It's not a triumphant ending. It's a confession. A surrender. A whispered, "I'm sorry," to a man he once called friend. That moment haunts you, doesn't it? Because you see how gratitude, once broken, doesn't just fade. It follows you. That emotional complexity leads us somewhere far more playful, yet no less strategic. In The Merchant of Venice, gratitude becomes negotiation, persuasion, even a form of justice. You'll meet Portia next, clever and composed, who turns thankfulness into a courtroom tactic. But that's for later. For now, let the Roman marble cool. Let Brutus's final breath linger. Let the silence say what words never quite could, that sometimes, we kill the ones we thank too deeply, and live the rest of our lives trying to explain why. You find yourself now in the warm glow of candlelight, within the measured, almost surgical precision of a Venetian courtroom. It's a different kind of tension than Rome, less swords, more sharp glances. This is The Merchant of Venice, where legalism and emotion dance a tight waltz. And here, gratitude wears yet another disguise. It's intellectual, tactical, graceful, but razor-edged. And in the center of it all is Portia, who turns expressions of thankfulness into one of Shakespeare's most powerful psychological plays. When you first meet Portia, she seems trapped, a wealthy heiress bound by her father's will to marry the suitor who picks the right casket. Gratitude, at this point, feels perfunctory. She thanks her suitors with practiced patience, even when they fumble. She thanks her dead father, sort of, for the strange lottery of fate he left behind. But that's only the prologue. Once Bassanio arrives and chooses correctly, things shift. Gratitude takes on momentum. Power dynamics start to tilt. Portia gives herself, her wealth, her home, her ring, with gracious words and open hands. But there's calculation behind the courtesy. You feel it. It's a giving that expects something in return, even if that something is emotional loyalty. And when Bassanio gives away the ring she gifted him, it's not just a broken promise. It's a breach of gratitude. He fails to recognize the emotional currency she offered. And Portia? Oh, she doesn't take it lightly. Modern psychologists call this a gratitude norm violation. A 2021 study in Personality and Social Psychology Bulletin found that people respond more strongly to the absence of gratitude than to its presence, especially in intimate relationships. When expectations of appreciation aren't met, people interpret it as a signal of disrespect or betrayal. Portia doesn't lash out. She just plays the long game, disguising herself as a male lawyer, entering the court, and turning the entire power structure on its head. Here's something interesting. Portia's courtroom speech about mercy is one of Shakespeare's most quoted monologues. The quality of mercy is not strained, she says, offering an appeal that sounds theological, philosophical, even divine. But it's also deeply strategic. She's setting a trap for Shylock, framing gratitude and mercy as moral imperatives he fails to live up to. It's less a plea and more a mirror. The issue has sparked significant intellectual debate. Is Portia truly benevolent, or is her mercy laced with superiority? She's gracious, yes, but also condescending. Gratitude, in her hands, becomes a kind of intellectual flex. She thanks the Duke. She praises Antonio. But it's all wrapped in a courtroom performance designed to win, not just the case, but the narrative. Just a quirky detail, in some historical interpretations, Portia is viewed as a stand-in for Queen Elizabeth I, a powerful woman navigating a man's world by mastering its rules. Her brand of gratitude is regal, never desperate, never too warm. Always just enough to remind others of her strength. When she gifts Bassanio the ring, she's not just saying, "Thank you for loving me." She's saying, "Let's see if you deserve me." And when he fails the test, she doesn't rage. She waits. She lets the gratitude imbalance hang in the air until he squints into it. That emotional patience is its own kind of power. You might find yourself admiring her, and being a little afraid of her. There's something else to notice here. Shylock, too, is entangled in a gratitude paradox. He's been othered, insulted, and mistreated by the very men who later expect mercy from him. Why should he be grateful to those who mock his faith and demand his ruin? His refusal to show mercy isn't just about vengeance, it's about emotional debt. He's been asked to say thank you for his own degradation, and he won't do it. Philosophers still argue whether the play's resolution is morally satisfying. Antonio is spared, Bassanio is forgiven, Portia is triumphant, but Shylock is forced to convert and lose his fortune. Is that justice, or just the victors rewriting the rules of gratitude to favor themselves? Shakespeare doesn't answer. He just leaves the courtroom eerily silent. You might find this surprising. In early versions of the play, Shylock was often performed more comically than sympathetically. Only later, with shifting cultural views, did actors begin portraying him as a tragic figure, someone whose pain demanded empathy, not mockery. That shift changes everything about how you interpret gratitude in this play. Suddenly, what looked like stubbornness starts to resemble trauma. What looked like bitterness starts to resemble heartbreak. And isn't that the real question? Can we ever truly thank someone who demands our suffering? Portia demands gratitude in the form of obedience. Antonio demands gratitude in the form of forgiveness. Shylock demands respect, which no one gives him. The court becomes a stage for emotional debts no one's quite willing to pay in full. Yet the most fascinating moment of all might come after the case is one, when Portia, still in disguise, requests Bassanio's ring. He hesitates. He falters. And then he gives it away. That gesture feels innocent, even noble. But to Portia, it's proof that his earlier gratitude was conditional. That he didn't really understand what she gave him. Her response? Quiet devastation, cloaked in sarcasm. "You gave me your soul, and now your ring too," she says, smiling with just enough sharpness to make Bassanio squirm. Psychologically, this reveals something deep. Gratitude isn't just about words or tokens. It's about being seen, understood, honored. When those things are missing, even a golden ring means nothing. This courtroom drama, with all its clever disguises and moral reversals, leads us into something even more emotionally entangled. In Othello, you'll see how expressions of love, loyalty, and thanks can be misread, or weaponized entirely. Desdemona will thank the man who will one day kill her. And you'll watch how the psychology of gratitude warps under the weight of jealousy. But for now, sit with Portia, still, sharp, and smiling like someone who knows 10 steps more than anyone else in the room. Let her brand of gratitude, measured, poised, calculating, remind you that thankfulness isn't always gentle. Sometimes, it's just another way to win. Now the air thickens. Heavy, slow, and scented faintly with betrayal. You step onto the streets of Venice again, but this time it's not legal debate that hangs in the air. It's suspicion. You're in Othello now, a play where gratitude whispers its way through love, loyalty, and lies, only to be swallowed whole by jealousy. And at the center of it all is Desdemona, a woman whose thankfulness becomes both her virtue and her undoing. Desdemona thanks Othello with her heart, her actions, her every breath. She defies her father, abandons her home, and follows Othello across cultures, wars, and worlds. You might call that love. But if you listen closely, it's also layered with deep gratitude. She sees in Othello not just a husband, but a man who chose her, a man who listened to her stories and made her feel seen. There's a thankfulness in that kind of intimacy, a silent one, but powerful. A 2014 study in emotion explored the concept of romantic gratitude, how feeling thankful to a partner can deepen emotional bonds and predict long-term relationship satisfaction. Desdemona lives this idea. Her deference to Othello, her gentle persistence, her willingness to excuse his anger early on, it all stems from a foundation of thankfulness. But what the study also found is that this dynamic becomes risky when one partner weaponizes that gratitude. And that's where Othello changes. Here's something interesting: when Othello begins to doubt Desdemona, it's not her love he questions, it's her intentions. He interprets her gratitude as manipulation. Her insistence on reinstating Cassio, her tenderness, her patience, all suddenly look like rehearsed performances to him. Gratitude becomes suspect. Affection becomes evidence. The issue has sparked significant intellectual debate. Some scholars argue that Othello's downfall is rooted in insecurity and racial alienation, that he can't fully believe he's loved by someone like Desdemona without suspecting a hidden motive. Others focus on Iago's manipulation, suggesting that it's Iago who plants the idea that no woman can be both grateful and faithful. Either way, you see how fragile gratitude becomes when twisted by fear. You might find this surprising. In many early performances of Othello, Desdemona was played with exaggerated submissiveness, making her constant kindness look naive, even cloying. But more recent interpretations highlight her strength, her conscious choice to love, to forgive, to remain emotionally open even when the cost is high. Her gratitude isn't weak. It's brave. And yet, it's used against her. Iago's genius lies in how he reframes Desdemona's gratitude into guilt. He suggests that her love for Othello must be overcompensation, that women always thank too much when they have something to hide. It's a manipulation rooted in psychological truth. Because gratitude, when it feels too perfect, too unshaken, can sometimes trigger suspicion in insecure minds. Just a quirky detail: in some traditional wedding customs from the Renaissance period, women were expected to kneel when receiving a gift from their husbands, a physical performance of gratitude. Desdemona never kneels. But her emotional posture often reads that way. Her constant efforts to soothe Othello, to calm him, to remind him of their shared past, it's the psychological equivalent of a bow. But gratitude isn't the only emotion she holds. When Othello begins accusing her, she doesn't just protest. She pleads with him to remember the man he was, the love they had. In those moments, she's not asking for mercy. She's asking for her gratitude to be recognized. She's asking not to be punished for the very loyalty she gave so freely. Philosophers still argue whether Desdemona's death is meant to represent innocence destroyed or trust betrayed. Some view her as a martyr to love. Others see her as a tragic figure of emotional misreading, a woman who kept thanking a man who no longer knew how to accept it. And Othello? His final speech is a psychological minefield. Then must you speak of one that loved not wisely but too well. In his dying moments, he thanks Desdemona, too late. It's a backward, broken thank you, a recognition of what he had and destroyed. It echoes, doesn't it? That final note of remorse, of sudden clarity. Like waking from a nightmare and realizing you were the monster all along. There's something uniquely human about Othello's collapse. His inability to accept Desdemona's gratitude mirrors a deeper self-doubt. He doesn't feel worthy. So he can't believe her. And once that seed is planted, no amount of sincerity can uproot it. Her kindness becomes a threat. Her love becomes a lie. And he kills the one person who truly saw him. Just before she dies, Desdemona does something most people forget. When Emilia finds her dying, Desdemona whispers, "Nobody, I myself. Farewell." She protects Othello. She thanks him, in her own quiet way, even as she gasps for breath. It's a moment that leaves you speechless. Not because it's dramatic, but because it's terrifyingly real. How often do people protect the ones who hurt them? How often do we thank those who've taken too much? Here's the tragic truth. Desdemona's gratitude isn't what kills her, but it certainly doesn't save her either. And Othello's regret doesn't undo the damage. Gratitude in Othello is a ghost. It moves through the play, whispered, distorted, and finally silenced. And now, that silence leads you somewhere new. Into a different kind of stillness. Away from the drama of betrayal and murder. Into a softer kind of wisdom. In Twelfth Night, you'll meet Feste, the fool who sees everything, says little, and expresses gratitude in riddles and jokes. But don't underestimate him. His brand of thankfulness might just be the truest of all. But for now, let Desdemona rest. Let the candle flicker out. Let her final words echo not as weakness, but as a strange, sorrowful strength, loving fully, even when love became a knife. Now the tone changes, like a soft fiddle tuning up after a funeral march. You're in Illyria, where identity bends, logic pirouettes, and nobody is quite who they seem to be. Welcome to Twelfth Night, where the world is upside down on purpose and the one person who seems to get it is the fool. Feste, the jester with the sly smile and a mind sharper than any sword, leads us into a new kind of gratitude. It's subtle, ironic, and often slipped in under layers of jest. But make no mistake, Feste's version of thankfulness may be the most psychologically honest of them all. You probably expect fools to be comic relief. Punchlines in motley. But Shakespeare's fools are more than that, they're truth-tellers. And Feste? He's a master of speaking gratitude sideways. He doesn't thank directly. He sings, he jokes, he pokes fun. But if you lean in, you'll hear it, under every rhyme and riddle, there's a thread of appreciation for human imperfection. One of the first things Feste says to Olivia is a backhanded compliment wrapped in truth. Better a witty fool than a foolish wit. That's not just wordplay, it's a nod to the emotional intelligence he brings into every room. He sees people clearly. He knows when to flatter, when to needle, and when to slip in just enough warmth to keep someone from falling apart. That balance? That's emotional mastery. A 2019 study from Frontiers in Psychology explored the connection between humor and gratitude in emotionally intelligent individuals. The researchers found that people with high emotional intelligence often express appreciation in non-traditional ways, through teasing, wit, and layered communication. Feste could have walked right out of that study. He rarely says, "Thank you," outright, but he's constantly offering thanks for human nature itself, the messy, foolish, lovable tangle of it. Here's something interesting. Feste's final song in the play, "The Rain It Raineth Every Day," has been interpreted as a quietly grateful nod to life's unpredictability. It's not cheerful in a traditional sense. But it embraces the chaos. It says, yes, the world is mad, but we're still here, aren't we? That's gratitude in its purest form, a kind of acceptance. The issue has sparked significant intellectual debate. Is Feste a figure of wise detachment or hidden sorrow? Some scholars argue he's the most grounded person in the play, a character who observes the romantic chaos around him and stays centered through his own brand of quiet thankfulness. Others see him as melancholy beneath the laughter, a man who hides his isolation behind riddles. Maybe it's both. Maybe his gratitude is precisely what keeps that sorrow from becoming despair. Just a quirky detail, historically, jesters were allowed to speak truths that no one else could say, often using humor as a shield. In Shakespeare's time, they were the only ones in the court who could mock the king and live. Feste takes full advantage of that loophole. He thanks through jest. He forgives through satire. And somehow, people keep inviting him back. Take Viola, for instance. Disguised as Cesario, lost in a web of mistaken identity, she forms a quiet rapport with Feste. He teases her mercilessly, but you can feel the mutual respect. He recognizes her intelligence. She sees his wisdom. Their interactions are peppered with what you could call coded gratitude, emotional acknowledgement hidden in wit. They don't hug it out. They out-wordplay each other. And somehow, that's more intimate than any thank you note. Philosophers have long debated the moral role of the fool in literature. Is he a force of chaos, or of clarity? Is gratitude meaningful if it's spoken with a wink instead of a bow? Feste challenges that entire framework. He makes you rethink what it means to be thankful. Not in a grand gesture, but in the act of still showing up, still caring, still laughing with people who are barely holding themselves together. And what about the others? Olivia, heartbroken and dramatic, ends up swept into marriage with someone she barely knows. Orsino, pompous and poetic, gets gently roasted by Feste for his performative melancholy. These people don't know themselves, but Feste does. And he still chooses to stay. That's its own form of gratitude. Choosing to remain in someone's life even when they're ridiculous. Especially when they're ridiculous. You might find this surprising. Feste is one of the few characters in Shakespeare's comedies who doesn't end up romantically paired. He walks off stage alone. But not bitter. Not regretful. He sings a song about storms and aging and folly, and somehow, it sounds like a lullaby. A thank you to the audience, maybe. Or to the world. Just listen to this line from his final verse. With tosspots still had drunken heads slash for the rain it raineth every day. It's not gratitude for beauty or brilliance. It's gratitude for the mess. For the people who drink too much and love too poorly and try too hard. He sings thanks for them. For us. And maybe that's what makes Feste's perspective so quietly powerful. He doesn't idealize gratitude. He doesn't force it to sound like a Hallmark card. He acknowledges that people are selfish, confused, and endlessly contradictory, and still worth appreciating. His gratitude doesn't deny the storm. It says, "You're soaking wet, and I still see you." And now, that gentle honesty carries us to a more magical place, literally. To a remote island where magic rules and old wounds seek closure. In the Tempest, we'll watch as gratitude becomes an instrument of healing. A way to forgive, to let go, and to transform. But tonight, as the echoes of Feste's song fade, let yourself linger in the fool's wisdom. Smile at his riddles. And maybe, just maybe, thank someone who's made you laugh when you felt like crying. You never know. That might be the truest thank you of all. You drift now across ocean winds and shifting sands, where the rules of time and power dissolve into mist. This is The Tempest, Shakespeare's farewell to the stage and, some say, his final meditation on forgiveness. The island breathes with magic, spirits flit through the trees, and everything feels just a little unreal. And yet, the emotion you feel here, so real it tightens your chest, is gratitude. Gentle, luminous, and redemptive. Prospero, the exiled duke turned sorcerer, controls the elements but not his past. You find him orchestrating storms and manipulating fate, but underneath the spells, you hear something else, the slow hum of someone learning to let go. Gratitude doesn't arrive immediately in the Tempest, it builds. Quietly. One gesture at a time. And when it finally arrives, it does what even Prospero's magic cannot. It transforms. The key moment, the emotional fulcrum of the play, happens when Prospero chooses mercy. After a decade of betrayal and bitterness, he forgives his enemies. But the forgiveness isn't cold or abstract. It's deeply human. He thanks Ariel, his spirit companion, for faithful service. He thanks the natural world, in his own way, for carrying his exile. And ultimately, he expresses a kind of cosmic gratitude, not just for survival, but for the chance to heal. A 2022 study in cognition and emotion found that gratitude increases significantly after experiences of suffering only when individuals believe they've gained insight or meaning from that suffering. Prospero fits this perfectly. He doesn't express gratitude while he's obsessed with revenge. Only after he realizes that clinging to the past is poisoning the present does he begin to feel genuinely thankful, for his daughter, for Ariel, for the life he still has. Just a quirky detail, Ariel, the airy spirit, only becomes free after Prospero thanks him. That's right, freedom follows gratitude. Not command, not demand. Shakespeare flips the power dynamic in that moment. Prospero, the master, softens. And Ariel, the servant, receives not just freedom, but recognition. You might not catch it the first time, but it's profound. A thank you changes everything. The issue has sparked significant intellectual debate. Is Prospero's gratitude sincere, or is it just another tool in his theatrical control of events? Some critics argue that he stages even his own redemption, that he's too self-aware, too rehearsed. But others see this as Shakespeare pulling back the curtain on himself. Prospero's last lines mirror Shakespeare's farewell to his audience. Let your indulgence set me free. That's not just a curtain call. That's a whispered thanks. Miranda, Prospero's daughter, embodies a different kind of gratitude. Her famous line, "Oh brave new world that has such people in't," is often quoted ironically. But at its heart, it's a burst of wonder. She's grateful for human connection. For discovery. For love. She has lived in isolation her whole life, and now, faced with flawed, unpredictable strangers, she still chooses hope. Her thankfulness isn't naive, it's courageous. You might find this surprising. In modern productions, directors often use light and music to underscore the shift in tone when Prospero thanks Ariel or embraces Miranda's future. The world literally brightens. It's as if the island itself exhales. That's the emotional release of sincere gratitude. It changes the temperature of everything. And then there's Caliban. Oh, Caliban. Savage, enslaved, poetic, misunderstood. Prospero curses him, controls him, even abuses him. And yet, Caliban shows gratitude in his own, rough-edged way. When he says, "I'll be wise hereafter, and seek for grace," it's not just a confession. It's a strange, stumbling form of thanks, for having been shown the weight of his actions, however cruelly. You don't have to like it. But it's there. Philosophers still argue whether The Tempest is a story of liberation or of colonial justification. Is Prospero a wise sage or a tyrant dressed in robes? Is his gratitude genuine, or self-serving? But Shakespeare doesn't offer clean answers. He just presents moments, tender, jarring, raw, and lets you feel your way through them. Here's something interesting. The final scene contains no explosions, no battles, no deaths. Just reconciliations. Just people admitting they were wrong, thanking those who stayed, forgiving those who strayed. It's like an emotional exhale after a lifetime of holding your breath. And maybe that's why The Tempest feels like an island you don't want to leave. Because it promises that even after anger, after exile, after manipulation, there can still be a return to self. Through gratitude. Not gratitude for perfection, but for survival. For love that endures. For new beginnings. Prospero's final act is to surrender his magic. And in that moment, he becomes mortal again. Vulnerable. Human. He turns to the audience, to you, and asks for something profound. As you from crimes would pardon be, let your indulgence set me free. He's not asking for applause. He's asking for your quiet mercy. Your understanding. Your forgiveness. And, maybe, your thanks. That soft emotional release carries us now into more turbulent waters. In the next plays, gratitude becomes knotted with curses, guilt, and complicated emotions. You'll see how Shakespeare weaves thankfulness with resentment, creating emotional contradictions that still feel shockingly modern. But for now, stay on this island a moment longer. Breathe its salt air. Feel the calm that follows the storm. And maybe, just maybe, whisper your own quiet thank you to someone who helped you heal, even when the world was loud with pain. Now you feel the emotional weather start to change again, clouds gathering, but not in a stormy way. More like the heavy air before a strange, internal rain. You're entering a space where feelings start to knot together. This isn't a simple thank you or a clean redemption arc. You've stepped into a realm of emotional contradiction, where gratitude comes with a side of resentment, and love rubs elbows with guilt. Shakespeare knew that not all thank yous are pure. Sometimes they're barbed, reluctant, even a little toxic. Welcome to the realm of mixed emotions. You see it most clearly when characters offer blessings that feel like curses, or speak words of thanks that tremble under the weight of unspoken pain. Gratitude, in these moments, isn't a balm. It's a battlefield. And the human mind, as modern psychology has discovered, is remarkably good at holding these contradictions. A 2020 article in Current Directions in Psychological Science outlined how gratitude can coexist with negative emotions, particularly in close relationships. People often feel grateful and angry at the same time. You might be thankful for your parents while resenting how they raised you. You might thank a partner for staying with you, while blaming them for not fully understanding you. Sound familiar? Shakespeare thought so too. Take all's well that ends well. Not a crowd favorite, but emotionally rich in its own uncomfortable way. Helena is deeply grateful to Bertram, grateful for his existence, for his nobility, for the chance to love him. She even risks her life to win him. But Bertram? Cold, resistant, annoyed by her devotion. When he finally accepts her, it's under pressure. His thanks come late and hollow. And Helena's joy is tinged with something darker: exhaustion, resignation, maybe even regret. The title says it ends well. But you feel the tension, don't you? That's not a happy ever after. That's a polite thank you with clenched teeth. Just a quirky detail. Some scholars believe Helena's pursuit of Bertram was inspired by folk tales in which clever women win reluctant husbands through tests or trickery. But Shakespeare complicates the formula. He shows us what happens after the cleverness. After the prize is won. Gratitude, here, is not a reward. It's a mask for deeper disappointment. Or look at Cymbeline, where Imogen forgives Posthumus for falsely believing she cheated, and for ordering her death. She greets him with tears, embraces him, and expresses joy at their reunion. Gratitude fills the scene. But underneath, you feel the dissonance. A woman nearly murdered by the man she loves, saying, thank you, because he didn't go through with it. It's Shakespeare at his most psychologically complex. The issue has sparked significant intellectual debate. Are these characters noble for forgiving, or simply trapped in emotional cycles they can't escape? Does Shakespeare believe in transformative gratitude, or is he showing how often it's just another form of self-sacrifice? And then there's Measure for Measure, a play where gratitude and power dance a slow, sinister waltz. Isabella pleads for her brother's life. The Duke, disguised, manipulates events. And in the end, he proposes marriage to her, without waiting for a clear answer. Her silence, her stillness, have been interpreted as many things: shock, submission, careful calculation. But one reading is especially chilling, that she says nothing because she's expected to be grateful. And sometimes, silence is the only way to survive that expectation. You might find this surprising. In some interpretations, Isabella's final silence is performed with a forced smile. A nonverbal thank you. A visible attempt to hold two truths in her mouth at once: relief and revulsion. It's a moment that lingers long after the play ends, and leaves you wondering how many times people say thank you when they want to scream. Philosophers still argue whether these moments are meant to critique societal structures or simply reflect them. Is Shakespeare exposing the emotional costs of duty-bound gratitude? Or is he endorsing them? The ambiguity is the point. Gratitude, when tangled with duty, becomes complicated. Sometimes it sets you free. Other times, it wraps around your throat. Here's something interesting. In many of Shakespeare's plays, characters who offer mixed emotion gratitude tend to survive. They adapt. They navigate. Shakespeare seems to suggest that emotional complexity is a kind of resilience. That to live in this world, you must learn how to hold contradiction in your heart, and say thank you anyway. Even in King Lear, remember? Gloucester forgives Edgar after a cascade of betrayal and manipulation. He thanks him for guiding him, even while blind. But the gratitude is laced with pain. "If I could bear it longer and not fall/to quarrel with your great opposeless wills," he says, meaning, "I'm grateful, but it still hurts." That scene doesn't resolve cleanly. It just lingers, like a bruise. So what do you do with this? With gratitude that feels complicated? You sit with it. You breathe through it. You recognize that thankfulness doesn't always mean joy. Sometimes it means survival. Sometimes it's a bridge to healing, and sometimes it's just the socially acceptable thing to say. This emotional contradiction leads us into something even more meta. What if all this performance of gratitude, the speeches, the bows, the reconciliations, wasn't even for the characters at all? What if it was for you? In the next section, we'll explore how Shakespeare turns the audience into emotional witnesses. How scenes of gratitude aren't just plot points, but invitations. But before you go there, stay here. In this quiet space of emotional ambiguity, let yourself remember a time you said thank you through clenched teeth. A time you felt both hurt and healed. That's not weakness. That's humanity. And Shakespeare saw it centuries before psychology ever gave it a name. Now you slip behind the fourth wall, stepping gently into the darkened space between stage and seat. You're not in the scene anymore, you're watching it. Feeling it. And maybe, just maybe, realizing that some of Shakespeare's most emotionally charged moments of gratitude aren't even meant for the characters. They're meant for you. Let's take a breath and say it plainly. Shakespeare wasn't just writing for dukes and fools and kings. He was writing for the audience. That includes nobles, yes, but also the groundlings with their muddy boots and cheap tickets. People standing in the pit, watching someone on stage sob through a thank you, or choke one down. People like you, sitting quietly, soaking up every emotional thread. In many of these plays, the expressions of gratitude come with a strange energy, almost as if the characters are performing them for someone else. The lines linger. They turn outward. They're designed to land on you, to stir something deep and personal. You might think you're a bystander. But Shakespeare was pulling you in all along. Take Hamlet, for instance. His speech to Horatio, "Give me that man/that is not passion's slave," feels like a thank you, doesn't it? He's praising Horatio's emotional balance, his loyalty. But it's also a cue. Shakespeare knew the audience would be watching Hamlet lose control for the next 2 hours. So when Hamlet thanks Horatio, you feel the contrast building in real time. It's a thank you to a stable center in a storm, and it becomes something you need, too. A 2020 paper from the Journal of Aesthetics and Art Criticism explored how performance-based gratitude scenes in drama often act as surrogate catharsis for the audience. In other words, when a character expresses gratitude, especially after a crisis, the emotional release isn't just theirs. It's yours. That warm swelling in your chest? That sigh? Shakespeare meant for you to feel that. Just a quirky detail, in Elizabethan theater, actors were trained to gesture to the audience directly in soliloquies. When a character like Prospero breaks the fourth wall and says, "Let your indulgence set me free," it wasn't subtle. He was looking at you. Asking you to release him. Thanking you for watching, for bearing witness. The performance wasn't complete until you silently accepted. This has sparked considerable scholarly debate. Is the audience just an observer, or an emotional participant? Some theorists argue that Shakespeare turns viewers into moral judges. Others see the audience as silent confessors, people the characters turn to when no one else will understand. Either way, the gratitude becomes reciprocal. You watch the characters thank each other, but you also begin to feel they're thanking you. For caring. For showing up. For listening. One of the most powerful examples of this comes from Coriolanus. When the titular character, proud, volatile, and emotionally bottled, finally shows vulnerability, it isn't to his soldiers or his mother. It's to you. The actor, at that moment, often steps forward, softens, and delivers his conflicted emotion not to another character, but to the space beyond the stage. You see a man crumbling, and something in you wants to reach back through time and say, "It's okay." You might find this surprising. Shakespeare often ends his comedies and romances with final speeches that serve little plot purpose. Think of As You Like It, when Rosalind offers her epilogue. Or A Midsummer Night's Dream, where Puck addresses the audience, "Give me your hands, if we be friends." These aren't just cute bows. They're thanks. Shakespeare giving you a smile and a nod for taking the journey with him. A theatrical handshake. This thankfulness goes deeper than tradition. It taps into a psychological need, the need to feel part of something, even when you're silent in the dark. When the characters break the wall, when they thank each other with warmth that feels a little too honest, you feel seen. You feel pulled into the emotional architecture of the play. That's gratitude doing its magic. Here's something interesting. In many modern performances, directors amplify this effect with lighting. During final monologues, they often shift the spotlight just slightly, so the character appears more intimate, more exposed. Sometimes the house lights dim further, pulling the audience into emotional closeness. These tricks work. You lean forward. You listen harder. You feel a part of the scene without even moving a muscle. It's not just the emotional speeches, either. Even smaller thank yous can echo in the audience's mind. In Much Ado About Nothing, when Benedict thanks Beatrice for loving him despite his flaws, the moment gets a laugh, but it also sticks with you. Because we all want that, don't we? To be loved despite ourselves. To be thanked for sticking around. That line might be written for Beatrice. But it lands on you. Philosophers still argue whether gratitude in performance is authentic. Is the actor feeling it? Is the audience really receiving it? But maybe those aren't the right questions. Maybe it's not about measurable sincerity. Maybe it's about emotional resonance. Shakespeare knew that even a pretend thank you, when delivered with skill, could make real feelings surface in you. That resonance carries us towards something final, toward the closing chapters of life. Because gratitude doesn't just come in relationships or performance. Sometimes, it comes at the very end. A final word. A last look. In the next section, we'll explore how dying characters express thanks, not just as farewell, but as legacy. But for now, rest in this moment of awareness. You, sitting in the quiet, feeling the echo of centuries-old voices thanking you, not for applause, but for empathy. That's what theater does best. It makes you feel like you were always part of the story. Now the lights dim low, not for drama, but for something quieter. More reverent. You're entering the final act, where words slow down, voices soften, and characters prepare to step into the dark. This is where Shakespeare's use of gratitude shifts again, into something final, reflective, and strangely beautiful. Welcome to the realm of last words. Shakespeare's dying characters often say thank you, not in grand speeches, but in murmurs. Their gratitude emerges in fragments, wrapped in forgiveness, regret, and acceptance. It's not about tying everything up with a neat emotional bow. It's about letting go with grace. About acknowledging the people who stayed, the lessons learned, or even just the strange, fleeting gift of having existed at all. Take Hamlet. Yes, again. But this time, in his final breaths. After so much death, madness, and betrayal, he turns to Horatio, the ever-faithful friend, and whispers, "If thou didst ever hold me in thy heart /absent thee from felicity a while, and in this harsh world draw thy breath in pain to tell my story." That's not just a request. That's a thank you. A final gift of trust. He asks Horatio to carry his memory, to preserve his dignity. You feel it, don't you? The quiet power of someone who knows it's over, and chooses to exit with gratitude, not rage. A 2021 study in Death Studies explored how expressions of gratitude at the end of life can increase feelings of peace, not just for the person dying, but for those around them. These moments create a sense of closure, of continuity. And Shakespeare, ahead of his time as always, built this into his storytelling like muscle memory. In Elizabethan England, dying well was a cultural value. People were expected to deliver a final speech that showed acceptance, humility, or faith. Shakespeare turned that social expectation into psychological theater. His characters don't just die. They leave emotional fingerprints, tiny thank yous etched into their last breaths. Look at Othello, once more. At the end, destroyed by jealousy and guilt, he reflects on his love for Desdemona, asking to be remembered honestly. "Speak of me as I am," he says, not with pride, but with humility. And though he doesn't say the words, "thank you," the tone is unmistakable. Gratitude for the truth. For memory. For one last chance to be seen. Then there's Cleopatra in Antony and Cleopatra, regal even in death. She thanks her servants for helping her die on her own terms, choosing the ASP, not the Romans. "Give me my robe, put on my crown, I have slash immortal longings in me." Her gratitude is defiant, radiant. She doesn't bow to death. She welcomes it like a lover. And the people around her? They honor her choice. That's not just drama. That's legacy. The issue has sparked significant intellectual debate. Are Shakespeare's death scenes idealized performances, or reflections of real human psychology? Do these characters truly feel grateful, or are they playing a role expected of them in their society? Critics disagree. But what matters is that these moments land. They resonate. They feel real, even centuries later. Even minor characters sometimes get a grateful exit. Take Enobarbus in Antony and Cleopatra. After betraying his friend, he dies of a broken heart, but not before expressing sorrow and a kind of backward thanks for the loyalty he once received. "I am alone the villain of the earth," he says. And in that despair, you can hear the echo of gratitude, for what was, and what he lost. Gratitude doesn't always appear in words, though. Sometimes it's in action. In King Lear, as Lear dies, he cradles Cordelia and begs her to breathe again. "Look on her. Look, her lips," he says. That moment, fragile, broken, hopeful, is soaked in thankfulness. For her love. For her return. For even a second more. And when he dies, it's not in triumph or peace. It's in longing. His thank you was lived, not spoken. Philosophers still argue whether Shakespeare believed in redemption through death. Do these characters die grateful because they've changed? Or because they simply have no choice? Is death the great leveler, softening even the most hardened hearts? Shakespeare never gives a definitive answer. But he gives you moments, like candle flames, flickering with emotional truth. Here's something interesting. In most of Shakespeare's tragedies, the final lines are given not to the dying, but to the survivors. The people left behind are the ones who speak, who remember, who honor the dead. In that, too, is a form of gratitude. They thank the fallen with story, with mourning, with vows to live differently. In Romeo and Juliet, after the lovers lie still, the families finally reconcile. It's too late, but the sentiment is there. "Oh, brother Montague, give me thy hand," says Capulet. The gesture isn't just a truce, it's an overdue thank you for the lesson they learned through loss. Painful, yes. But real. Even in the comedies, death, or the threat of it, invites gratitude. When characters come back from the brink, like in Much Ado About Nothing or The Winter's Tale, their reunions are heavy with emotional depth. People don't just laugh. They cry. They fall to their knees. They say, "thank you," with every hug. Gratitude becomes sacred. And maybe that's the point. That at the edge of life, when all the costumes fall away and the masks come off, the last thing many people feel isn't fear or regret. It's thanks. Thanks for being seen. For being loved. For being given a chance, however messy, to be part of the human story. This final, mortal gratitude leads us now into the last layer. Into a question that floats long after the curtain falls. Why does gratitude in Shakespeare still hit so hard? Why does it linger in our modern, messy hearts? That's where we're going next. Into reflection. Into resonance. Into you. But before that, let's pause here. In the hush after a final breath. In the quiet between last words and the slow closing of the stage lights. Let yourself feel whatever gratitude stirs in your own chest, whether it's clean, tangled, heavy, or light. It's all welcome here. You followed these thank yous through madness and magic, through love and loss, through forgiveness and final breaths. And now you arrive at the question that lingers beneath it all. Why does gratitude in Shakespeare still haunt us? Why, centuries later, do these quiet expressions still press their fingers against our chest and say, "Feel this"? It's not because Shakespeare wrote "thank you" more than anyone else. In fact, the word appears surprisingly rarely. But the emotion, the raw, complex, often contradictory experience of gratitude, is everywhere. It's in the gaps between lines. In the pauses. In the way a character turns their head or lowers their voice. Shakespeare understood that gratitude isn't always spoken. Sometimes it's carried. You, too, carry it. Whether you realize it or not, you've absorbed these moments: Lear's desperation, Desdemona's forgiveness, Feste's sly compassion, Prospero's release, and they've become little emotional echoes in your own life. That's the thing about Shakespeare's gratitude. It doesn't just live in his characters. It wakes something in you. Modern psychology calls this emotional mirroring, the phenomenon where witnessing emotional expressions, even fictional ones, activates our own empathy circuits. A 2019 study from Neuroscience and Biobehavioral Reviews found that audiences watching emotionally charged theater exhibited real changes in brain activity. Particularly when themes of gratitude or forgiveness were present, people reported more connection, more self-reflection, and, interestingly, more personal gratitude in the hours following the performance. So when you cry during Lear's apology, or smile at Viola's unspoken affection, your brain isn't just watching. It's feeling. Shakespeare didn't write for passive listeners. He wrote for hearts that would carry the emotion home. In some early Shakespearean productions, audiences were encouraged to respond vocally to scenes, clapping, gasping, even shouting. So when a character said something like, "I can no other answer make but thanks, and ever thanks," people might murmur their approval. Imagine that. Gratitude, echoing between actor and audience, across wooden boards and candlelight. But the haunting comes not from the applause. It comes from the silence after. That breath when the line has passed, and something inside you still holds it. Philosophers have long debated whether gratitude is an innate human instinct or a learned behavior. Is it part of our moral code, or something society teaches us to perform? Shakespeare, of course, never weighs in directly. But his plays make a quiet argument that gratitude is not an obligation, it's a need. A need to connect. To acknowledge. To find meaning in the mess. Look back through what you've seen: kings begging forgiveness, lovers offering thanks in their final words, fools making jokes that double as life lessons. And always, always, the ache of wanting to be seen and remembered. Gratitude in Shakespeare is less about manners and more about recognition. It says, "You mattered to me. Even if you hurt me. Even if you're gone." You might find this surprising. The word "remember" appears over 200 times in Shakespeare's works. Often in emotional peaks. It's tied to grief, to honor, to love, and, almost always, to gratitude. Because remembering is a form of thankfulness. It's a way to keep people alive, not just in story, but in feeling. In Sonnet 30, Shakespeare writes, "But if the while I think on thee, dear friend, all losses are restored, and sorrows end." That's pure emotional gratitude, grief soothed by memory. Heartache softened by reflection. It's not a loud thank you, but it's one that stays with you long after the page is turned. The issue has sparked significant intellectual debate. Some scholars argue that Shakespeare's thankfulness is strategic, meant to balance the darker themes in his works. Others see it as emotional ballast, grounding his tragedies in something human and redemptive. Maybe both are true. Because gratitude, in his hands, is never tidy. It's layered, flawed, resilient. And it resonates because you are layered, flawed, resilient. You've probably thanked someone through tears. Or forgiven someone silently. Or smiled at a memory that hurt once. That's why Shakespeare's expressions of gratitude still work. They don't offer perfection. They offer truth. Here's something interesting. The last surviving piece of Shakespeare's handwriting is a legal document where he signs away property. There's no poetry in it. Just ink and business. But when you read his plays, his letters to the world, they feel like the real legacy. A quiet thank you to the human condition. And to you, for still listening. You don't need a stage to feel this. You don't need candlelight or costumes. You just need to sit with a moment of honesty and say, that felt real. Maybe it was Cordelia's soft loyalty. Maybe it was Brutus's trembling remorse. Maybe it was just Feste singing into the dusk. Whatever stayed with you, that's where the haunting lives. And so we arrive at the edge of the story. Not a conclusion, but a soft tapering off. In the final section, you'll be gently walked into a wind down, a slow unraveling of thought and feeling. A time to settle into stillness, to rest in the warmth of what you've absorbed. But for now, linger here. Let your mind drift across the plays, the voices, the echoes. Let yourself remember a line, a character, a gesture that caught your breath. And if it brought you even a sliver of peace, that's enough. You don't need to understand all the words to feel the truth behind them. You just need to feel. And now, you float gently toward the shore. The journey is almost over. You've walked beside kings and fools, ghosts and lovers, and felt the weight of thank yous that arrived too early, too late, or not at all. You've listened as Shakespeare's characters whispered their gratitude in the strangest places, between sword strokes, under courtly smiles, in the breath before goodbye. You've seen how thankfulness flickers in every genre, every corner, every silence. And now, you let it settle. But before the curtain falls completely, let's reflect one last time, not on the plays, but on you. Why does this all stay with you? Why does gratitude, in all its messy contradictions, continue to echo through the chambers of your mind, like a bell rung long ago but still humming? Because at its core, gratitude is about recognition. And humans, by design, crave that. You want to be seen. You want to matter. And sometimes, you want to thank someone not because they saved you, but because they stayed. Because they sat beside your sadness. Or didn't turn away when you didn't know what to say. Shakespeare understood that. He gave us moments where characters didn't say, thank you, outright, but showed it. Like Horatio holding Hamlet's dying body. Like Cordelia returning to Lear. Like Prospero releasing Ariel. These moments wrap around you like a soft blanket. Not too tight. Not too warm. Just enough to remind you, someone understood. And isn't that what we want at the end of the day? To feel understood. To be quietly thanked for trying, even if we failed. To know that our efforts, our loyalties, our longings were not wasted. That someone saw us, even when we stumbled. So now, let the noise fade. Let the characters return to their pages. Let the spotlights dim, one by one, like candles in a church after the final hymn. The applause has stopped. The stage is quiet. But you? You're still here. You've stayed to the end. That's something. That's everything. And now, as promised, a gentle wind down. Let your mind ease into the quiet now. The voices you've heard tonight, Lear calling into the storm, Desdemona whispering with her final breath, Feste singing in twilight, are growing softer. Their words, once sharp and full of feeling, now feel like distant waves brushing against the edge of your thoughts. Let them wash over you. No need to hold on to them. Just let them ebb. You've carried a lot through these stories. Conflicted thankfulness. Joy mixed with sorrow. Betrayal softened by forgiveness. It's okay if it felt like a lot. Shakespeare meant it that way. He didn't write emotions in clean lines. He wrote them like rivers, flowing in different directions, winding through light and dark. And now, you get to rest. You can imagine a stage, empty and dark. Maybe a single chair in the center. Maybe a candle burning low. Maybe nothing at all, just silence. The kind of silence that comes after something honest has been said. The kind of silence that says, you made it through. Take a deep breath. In through the nose. Slow. Soft. Let your chest rise just a little. Now exhale. Feel the breath leave your body, and let the thoughts go with it. Whatever feelings are left, gratitude, sadness, wonder, let them settle like snow in your mind. You don't have to do anything with them. Just let them be. And if this story brought you a little comfort tonight, thank you for being here. Let's slowly drift into tonight's quiet moments together. Sweet dreams.